So what I'd like to do is just give you a level set as to my background and the context in which I'll be making some of the later comments in the presentation, just to give you a sense of some of the things that I've done and sort of where I'm coming from the entrepreneurship perspective. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what I see from my opinionated perspective as the climate for entrepreneurship today. And then I'd like to talk about some of the things that I've learned. A major part of my reason for being involved in the advisory board at Rothman Institute is so that I can hopefully impart some of the knowledge that I've gained, some of the arrows that you can probably still see in my back from having done a few startup companies in the state of New Jersey, and hopefully this will benefit some of the folks in the audience and maybe others if you can pass on that information, which has been my primary objective in being involved here. So just by way of background, Dr. Adams mentioned that I come from a networking and communications background. I have a master's degree in engineering from Columbia University. Started my career at AT&T Bell Laboratories and spent about 4.5 years there doing a variety of different things. Never at any point ever having thought during that time that I was going to become an entrepreneur. Never crossed my mind. It was really after working for a while at Bell Labs and understanding a little bit more about some of the things that were going on in the networking and communication industry that I began to see some of the great opportunities ahead of us in the world of telecommunications and data networking, computer communications and networking. And it was then that I began to kind of get bitten by the bug, so to speak. And I've since, leaving AT&T, co-founded 3 high technology startups in the state of New Jersey, 2 of which thankfully have managed to have successful exits for our investors. First company, Teleos Communications, I actually spent 7 years at in a variety of different roles, from engineering management to marketing. When I left there, I was actually VP of marketing. I did an interesting career shift kind of midway through my life there, which over a beer I'll actually talk to some of you about later. And then at AccessWorks, began to focus on the emergence of the internet and the ability for plain old people like you and I to leverage that communications infrastructure to do useful things like access information that might be available in our office. And to do it in a very quick fashion using broadband connectivity. And that was the first time I was actually president and CEO of a company, and learned a lot about what to do and what not to do, some of which I'll actually share with you at the end of the presentation. And now since 1999, have actually been in a venture-funded startup company called Netilla Networks, which again, true to form, is focused on networking and communications, but this time with a bent towards security. And how does one secure the access to these critical resources that are available in the computer center? And so this is a little bit of my background and some of the things that I've actually learned. Ted, can you pop the next slide? Thanks. Quickly on Netilla, just again to level set and context for the audience. Been there for almost 5 years. We are providing secure application access for enterprises, for business customers that need to have their remote mobile workers, business partners leverage the internet to securely access their applications that are in their data center. When we started this, there was zero market for it. No one knew that this was going to happen, and over the course of the past 3 or 4 years, it's now developed into what some believe will become $1 billion market opportunity over the next 3 or 4 years. And this is the thing that most entrepreneurs do. They kind of venture out, take a risk, where everyone thinks that they're crazy for doing it, and hopefully things come your way. And in the case of Netilla, so far, things have seemingly started to come our way. We actually began shipping products in 2001. And we, during the course of the past 3 years, which I will talk a little bit more about, have raised about $19 million in venture funding. The company is about 45 people today, located in Somerset, New Jersey. Next slide. Just quickly, pictorially, what people do with our product. People, you see a lot of words, you don't often understand what it is, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. That pizza box there over on the kind of mid-right-hand side is the product that we make. It's an appliance. It drops into a computer center. And what it basically does is it allows remote users who are way on the other side to use simple web browsers to provide authenticated, controlled, managed access into all of the data applications that are available in the data center. So if you've got somebody out there that's a salesperson with a little wireless device and they're connected to the internet, we can provide them connectivity into their applications infrastructure. And we can do it in such a way that you can monitor what they do, you can control what they do, you can control what they get to. And this is something that we've sold to, next slide, sold to over 500 enterprises. We have sold some 30,000 licenses of this software that runs on this appliance. We have over now pretty close to 1,000 of these security platforms that are in place around the world. In fact, last December, we, for the first time, established an entity outside the US with Netilla Europe. And we've got 150 partners around the world who are actively selling this solution to companies, to businesses. So that's a little bit about Netilla, and kind of hopefully will give you some idea, next slide, on the coloring of what I'm about to talk about in terms of the state of entrepreneurship. Given that this has been the third startup that I've been actively involved with, I've had a little bit of an opportunity to see and to experience entrepreneurship firsthand. Someone wrote in a book that I can't take credit for this comment, but I always remembered it, is that in general in a startup, if you're not having a bad day, that you're probably not in a good startup. It's tough. It is a very difficult environment, and yet, in my experience, the past 3 to 4 years, have probably been the most difficult in terms of starting a new high technology business, given the economic climate, given the kind of difficulty in getting enterprises to actually pay for technology. And so it has been a very, very rough period for what previously had been a cakewalk in some regards, even though it didn't seem easy back then, but by contrast, it was much easier in the first two startups than in Netilla so far. Sales cycles have been long. Many of our business partners have had issues, financial issues of their own in terms of managing their customer relationships and their cash flow. From an investment standpoint, there have been, for most companies that could identify capital, there have been down rounds of valuation, meaning that you start out with a valuation here when your first round, you do great, you do all the things you say you're supposed to do, or most of them, and you wound up in the next round having a lower valuation than the first one, which sometimes can be a bit discouraging. And I'm sure all of you in the audience who are familiar with venture capital financing in the past few years have certainly seen this. But luckily, in the case of Netilla, we actually have been able to raise the capital that we needed. There haven't been, it hasn't been a cakewalk for the VCs either. The VCs, many of them have not been able to achieve exits in their investments. They've had portfolio issues and challenges. And in many cases, there have been some VC firms that have raised a lot of capital that have simply gone out of business, that no longer exist. And in truth, this has been the past few years kind of an environment where I would categorize it as truly, if you could make it through, it was Darwinian. It was survival of the fittest. And hopefully we're a better company because of it, because we are still standing at this point. But there are a lot of our colleagues that didn't necessarily make it through this period. So that's the perspective that I come as a CEO of an early stage company after having lived through the past few years. What are the implications of all of this? And a lot of this is my opinion. There's probably some of you in the audience who might disagree with some of it. But for sure, once upon a time, companies were very eager and interested in buying from very innovative, very young, very fast-moving, high-technology companies. And now oftentimes when I go into a customer meeting, the person I'm dealing with is asking me, and how much cash do you have on your balance sheet? And how do we know that you're going to be around next year? And it really becomes an important factor when now stability is questioned during the course of the sales process. And this is something that previously, while it was a factor, was never a critically important factor, but certainly it is now in the wake of so many early stage companies having had difficulty in 2000 and 2001. Once upon a time, one of the other implications recently has been attraction of the top engineering talent. Many engineers are opting to kind of go towards larger, more established companies because they've been through a downturn, because they can't bear to risk their family situation any longer. And so recruiting the top talent from a CEO's perspective, while there have been more people available in the pool, the very top talent who could always go anywhere, it's a lot more difficult to recruit those very, very best people because it is a startup and it is higher risk. And so the pendulum has swung, way the other way. And so what do you see going on? You see Netilla, as well as many of our counterpart companies at similar stages, who are doing a certain amount of outsourcing by necessity, where you're going offshore to hire engineers in certain other countries. In the case of Netilla, about 40% of our engineering team is not located in the US for cost reasons, for economic reasons, as well as for the ability to attract that kind of talent to the company reasons. And so these are very important implications for us. One of the things that I've found recently, which I believe is an implication, is that many countries are moving somewhat faster than the US in terms of implementation of technological solutions. I've spent about 5 or 6 weeks last year in aggregate in Asia. And when I go to Japan, everyone has kind of got the little cell phones and they've got their little broadband wireless connectivity in their phones, and they're doing very interesting things with it. They're doing messaging, they're doing maps, they're doing all that sort of stuff. You don't really see that here in the US marketplace to the same extent. Many of the other developing nations also in Asia are doing similar kinds of things. They're implementing and adopting this technology at seemingly a faster rate than we are here in the US market. And I believe, personally, some of you might disagree, but there's also, an implication of this period that we've gone through in terms of the adoption of innovative and new services and new technologies. And last, which is I hope I'm wrong about, is that among some entrepreneurs, colleagues of mine, there may be a certain psychological damage of well, it's so hard to raise money, it's so hard to get something going that maybe we shouldn't try. And that's the most dangerous and most unfortunate one, because I personally believe that a lot of innovation in the US economy actually comes from entrepreneurs, people like you and I that are in this room and that are willing to take a risk and risk our families and so forth. But you always have an upbeat psychology. The psychology is that you're going to find a way to solve the problems, that you're going to succeed. And that's something I hope that I'm very wrong about, that the psychological damage is not too wide extent or widespread. So, with that kind of as a backdrop, we do see, and I do see some glimmers of hope ahead for early stage companies. later stage companies have recently been able to gain and attract revenue. What I mean by later stage is companies with revenue, with customers, with a business model that's been proven. It doesn't necessarily help the two people and the dog in the garage that we kind of saw in the early days of the high-tech industry. But hopefully the pendulum is beginning to swing the other way, and it'll continue to swing that way, and you'll start to see very early stage companies getting funded again. There has been an increase in merger and acquisition activity over the course of the past 6 to 12 months, particularly in selective areas. In our particular space, which is SSL-based virtual private networks, for example, we've seen 3 or 4 of our competitors actually get purchased by larger companies who didn't have the technology within their portfolio. And so I think that that's a positive sign, and I think that the venture capitalists will begin to see that and hopefully begin to invest again in early stage companies or earlier stage companies. There are also some other signs. I'm sure most of you have seen all the talk about Google going public, and that could be a great psychological influence on the marketplace. And in fact, from a numbers perspective, there have been more IPOs of technology companies in the past year, and a whole bunch of them in March, and we'll see whether those get a chance to go out to the market. So all of these, I think, are very, very positive signs for the marketplace and for entrepreneurship and for the ability to raise capital in general. And I'm hoping that this is a trend for the next several years. It will continue to improve. So what are the things that I've learned, kind of going through this whole process? Some of these things were learned most recently, but the big thing is that this stuff is hard. There's not a lot of people that do it, and it's hard. Every day, you are close to the brink, or potentially close to the brink. There's always a problem. There's always an issue. There's something that has to be tackled, and entrepreneurs thrive on that sort of stuff. We have had to be very focused and manage and watch our expenses extremely carefully. It's not a day that goes by that someone in my organization doesn't come to me and say, well, Reg, if we could invest over here, then here's how much more we could get in 6 months. And I say, well, in 6 months, if we did that, we might not be in business in 3. Right? So you can't do that. Cash is king. You've got to manage it very effectively. We've done some things like do offshore development. We've done a lot of co-marketing with partners who have brought their own money to the table. And so business partnering has become, I think, very important for early stage companies. And it's something that I encourage entrepreneurs to look at and to engage in very quickly. The financial strength of your partners becomes critical. I'm proud to say that in 4 years of actively selling at Netilla, we've really only had 1 bad debt, and even that one was very painful for us to swallow. And that's just because we were kind of ogres when it came to kind of managing the financials and not extending credit. We've had to focus on key sweet spots. What are the areas of opportunity that are here and now, and oftentimes very tactical. We have had to expand, sometimes over the objections of our investors, into international markets much more quickly than we normally would have. It is truly, it's a true thing that many organizations today have to become global organizations at very early stages in their life cycle. We've established our presence in Europe, we established our presence in Asia simply because there were customers there that you had to get to. If you weren't getting the revenue in this marketplace, you had to go to where the revenue was. And that puts other stresses on the organization as well. Next. So, what are the things that we learn not to do? And sometimes, you can look on the internet and you can see all kinds of things of what to do as an entrepreneur and how to do plans and how to figure this out, and there's a lot of wisdom there. But what I've found, at least when I was looking on the internet and in various publications, there oftentimes weren't anything that said what not to do. And here are a few things that I've learned over especially the time at Netilla. Don't take too long to get out to the marketplace and try stuff out. It's very important to know very quickly whether, the dogs are going to eat the dog food and you're going to actually be able to get some sales traction and sell something in the marketplace. There's oftentimes a tendency to forget that what this is really ultimately about is you got to sell something to a customer in a real marketplace, and you got to find those customers pretty quick. You also can't do it alone. You can't do it alone inside the company, and increasingly, you can't do it alone outside the company. You've got to have internal partners, and you've got to have external partners who are able to help you build a business. And this is an area where I think most entrepreneurs are generally not so good at, and generally need to get much better at if they're going to survive. And then certainly last but not least, if you look through history at entrepreneurs, you always talk about those folks who were, pervasive, who just never gave up, who were persistent, just constantly went at it. But I add a little twist to that. Don't give up, be persistent, be as dogmatic as you always have been as an entrepreneur, but you also got to be willing to change during the course of time. If you looked at my business plan in 1999, it's way different than what we wound up actually doing and making money at. So you've got to be willing to, as one of my investors likes to say, you've got to be able to zig as well as zag in this whole process. And generally for entrepreneurs in the audience, what investors typically are investing in is the people and their ability to recognize those changes and shifts and to move with them in the marketplace. Don't forget about your family while you're doing all this, because at the end of it, that's what this is all about. It's about your family. It's about your kids, your spouse, your parents, the people that are close to you, and all of this will mean nothing if you don't have that in the end. So in conclusion, I think entrepreneurship is remaining critical, key, very important to the U.S. economy. I again applaud the folks in the audience, the young people who are going down that path, and I encourage you to continue that way. There are lots of opportunities, but there's going to be global competition and there's going to be global demand. They're going to go hand in hand. You're not going to get the demand without the competition, and you just gotta live with it. And given where the pendulum has swung, this is a time where, for all entrepreneurs, this is about, back to business basics. You gotta find, customers with a willingness to pay, who you're gonna make happy, and who are gonna pay their bills, hopefully, on time. So those are kind of my experiences, particularly over the past 2 or 3 years. Again, I appreciate and I'm honored by being selected to present my thoughts to you this evening, and hopefully I haven't overstayed my welcome. Thank you very much. Jim, I think we got time for questions. Yeah.
How did you choose the name of your firm? How do you differentiate it from that great hazelnut chocolate?
Netilla versus Nutella. Well, we are not nuts, first of all, even though you might think so. Netilla actually came from networking and Godzilla, big networking, so we just kind of put it together. We paid for that too, by the way. Yeah.
It's such a dynamic market. How do you deal with business planning cycles? Can you talk a little bit about that forward thinking and your cycle planning?
Yeah, the question was, how do we deal with business planning cycles? One of the other things I was thinking about putting into the presentation is that, a plan is not as good as the paper it's written on. It's just constantly changing. We adjust our plans typically, once a quarter based upon dynamics, sometimes more often than that. But, from a formal operating plan perspective that we file, we officially do it twice a year, but kind of once a quarter we really readjust to what's going on in the market. And at board meetings, which are still for us monthly, we're actually discussing, well, what's the current state of the business and what do you need to change? So it is an extremely, extremely dynamic environment, and it puts pressure on lots of parts of the organization. Because as soon as you kind of got something that you think is settled, you're kind of changing some aspects of it, perhaps at the tactical layer. What doesn't change so dramatically or so often, I don't want to give you the sense that this is like a daily change. We're going to go from making baskets to making networking equipment. It's not that, but you do have a vision. You do have kind of a mission for the business. And you establish that, and you establish a general course and a general direction, but there's a lot of fine-tuning that goes on underneath. And oftentimes that can happen weekly. And for the entrepreneurs in the audience, kind of another kernel of wisdom is that the only real advantage that a small company has is its ability to move quickly and to change quickly to react to those kind of market trends and changes. That is it. Big companies have more money, they've got more people, they've got people just as smart as you and 10 times as many of them. The only real advantage is that you could come back from a customer meeting and you could change on a dime and you could go win the business if you execute properly after you make that decision. The ability to make quick decisions is the single biggest advantage that you can make that you have in a small company. Big companies don't have that. They're like these big oil tankers. You got to stop them 5 miles out so they coast in. You just can't change on a dime to that extent.
What was the Eureka moment that got you to know that you had to go global? What customer did you come back from that said, I got to go?
I looked.
Choose healthcare.
Well,
They got the money.
There were two things that happened. I can't stand up here today and say, oh, well, we thought about healthcare and we did all kinds of fancy analysis and figured it all out. What happened was we were selling through a distribution channel, through resellers, and out of the first 20 customers, 8 of them were in healthcare. So we scratched our head and we said, well, why? And we went and figured it out, and figured out what the dynamics were in that industry, and then ultimately decided after that work that there was enough depth there for us to do some vertical marketing. So that was the Eureka moment. Where were you selling, and was there a reason that in that data you saw so much of healthcare? The global thing was also kind of people coming to us. We were selling in the U.S. and things were sort of going okay, growth was okay, but number one, I had come from a company that did 50% of its business outside the U.S., and number two, resellers and customers were coming to us and saying, we have exactly the same issues, maybe even more so than for security and application access in the European market or in the Japanese market or the various Asian markets. And so we decided that, okay, you got to build a strategy that takes your solution there, or your competitors were going to take it there. And you had to be there, or you were just going to be missing out, and ultimately you'd get locked out of that market because you would just have no share. So we did that probably a lot earlier than a company at our stage normally would have. Yeah.
Do you think in the near future, or do you anticipate in the near future, an overabundance of net companies for the entrepreneur planning ahead? That there may be someday too many, or there's no openings in net companies?
No, I mean, the question for the audience is, do I ever think there's going to be an overabundance or too many networking companies? These things have a tendency to solve themselves. The past 3 years, if that was going to happen, it ain't that way now. Because I think I read something somewhere that said like 600 or 700 venture-funded companies went poof in the past 3 years, just disappeared, and a lot of those were networking companies that were focused on telcos, for example, which was a market that just absolutely went away because they weren't buying anything. It's possible within certain segments that could happen, and you could see an overabundance. But again, these things are self-correcting. what'll happen is, companies will start combining or companies will start going away if they don't have enough market share. There's always going to be an opportunity for the next generation of networking, communications, computer communications, and I'm still of the view that we're still just scratching the surface. I mean, if you look at how complicated this stuff is still to put in, to make work, to get users to connect to it, I mean, it's just complicated still. I mean, I equate where we are to kind of like, Model T Fords, you had to still get out and crank, it's just so many innovations that they're still available in that space. It's gonna continue, I think, my opinion.
When you got started as an entrepreneur, what is the one thing on the downside now that you remember that you thought was going to hurt solution but didn't? What's the one thing that the entrepreneur of today should kind of get about in your perspective?
You faded out at the last part. What's the one thing that an entrepreneur...
One thing that they should, I guess, from your perspective, you've learned a lot along the way. What is the one lesson you can give to the entrepreneur of today that may be a big help to them?
I think the one thing that I would say is if you've got a good idea, what you think is a great idea, you have to find a way to test it early and quickly to see whether it's going to gain traction, because you might think it's great, but there might be a flaw in it. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs doing it for the first time in high tech, have the tendency to believe that, hey, this is it. They have a lot of passion behind it. This is the idea. This is the concept. But maybe it is. But if you share it with certain people, certain individuals within the industry, you'll probably have an opportunity to make it better. You'll probably have an opportunity to really figure out whether it's such a good idea or not, and you'll learn from it. A lot of entrepreneurs are very close to the vest. Oh, I don't want to let anyone see this particular idea because it's the next revelation, right? But you've got to be able to communicate it to the investor community. You've got to be able to communicate it to your customers. You've got to be able to talk to people about what that concept is and to boil it down to their level, or they're not ultimately going to buy it. The earlier that you can do that, the earlier that you can distill kind of what the key elements are and the very important facets of that concept are, and figure out whether it really is the next greatest thing since sliced bread, the earlier you can do that, the better. A lot of entrepreneurs take too long before they get that and get that feedback, and therefore it doesn't necessarily get incorporated, and the idea doesn't get polished, it doesn't get better. So that's the advice that I give to early stage, especially technology entrepreneurs, about find an advisor, find a group, find someone that's done it before, let them poke holes at it.